My core vision and value statement. We should work toward a society where dignity, opportunity, and justice are the foundation of every public policy and where governance is rooted in transparency, equity, and a commitment to the common good. We believe in economic fairness, universal human rights, and the equal protection of our environment, as well as the empowerment of individuals in all their diversity. These guiding principles form the moral compass of our agenda and inspire every policy we seek to implement. Values guiding policy 1. Justice and equality. Commitment. Justice should not be a privilege but a guaranteed right for all, transcending race, gender, nationality, or economic status. Objective. To dismantle systemic inequities, uphold civil rights, and ensure equal access to social, political, and economic opportunities. 2. Environmental responsibility. Commitment. A sustainable environment is essential for the prosperity of future generations. Objective. To implement policies that hold polluters accountable, ensure fair distribution of environmental benefits, and transition toward renewable resources. 3. Nonpartisan integrity and public empowerment. Commitment. Decision-making should serve the interests of the people rather than partisan agendas or corporate influence. Objective. To establish governance practices focused on transparency, public oversight, and responsive leadership that values citizen input. 4. Economic fairness. Commitment. The economy should work for everyone, not just the wealthy, by providing fair wages, equitable work conditions, and paths to prosperity. Objective. To guarantee living wages, enforce co-determination in workplaces, and close the wealth gap through progressive economic policies. 5. Universal access to healthcare and education. Commitment. Quality healthcare and education are fundamental rights, essential to personal and societal well-being. Objective. To establish comprehensive, accessible systems for healthcare and education that leave no one behind, empowering every individual to achieve their potential. 6. Community and social solidarity. Commitment. A nation's strength is derived from its communities and the support structures within them. Objective. To promote policies that build resilient, connected communities where resources are available for the welfare of every citizen. Social and economic justice. Overview. We should aim to create an economy where workers and their contributions are respected, where wealth is fairly distributed, and where everyone can achieve a decent standard of living. True social and economic justice means addressing wage gaps, enforcing fair labor practices, promoting co-determination in corporate governance, and ensuring that all citizens have access to basic economic opportunities. 1. Labor rights and co-determination. Co-determination policies establish a framework for co-determination, empowering workers to have direct representation on corporate boards. This democratic approach to corporate governance fosters a fairer distribution of profits and decision-making power. Worker protections. We should advocate for robust protections against unfair dismissal, discriminatory practices, and workplace harassment. Every worker deserves a safe, equitable environment that respects their rights and promotes productivity. Union empowerment. Reinforce the rights of workers to unionize, collectively bargain, and engage in peaceful protests. Union rights should be regarded as essential tools for securing fair treatment and wages, especially in industries prone to exploitation. Wage transparency. Encourage legislation that mandates wage transparency within companies, aiming to close pay gaps and promote fair compensation practices for all employees. Establishing a livable wage. Raising the minimum wage. Aim to increase the national minimum wage to at least $20 an hour, indexed to inflation, to keep pace with the cost of living. This ensures that full-time workers earn enough to afford basic necessities without requiring additional support. Tipped minimum wage reform. Eliminate sub-minimum wages for tipped workers by implementing a universal base wage for all industries, reducing economic vulnerability and exploitation in tipped professions. Universal Basic Income, UBI. Explore UBI programs to address future automation, providing a safety net that supports those impacted by technological shifts. UBI trials could inform a nationwide program with flexible support based on regional living costs. 3. Tax equity and economic fairness. Wealth tax. Implement a progressive wealth tax targeting ultra-high net worth individuals to address wealth inequality. This will create a revenue stream to fund social programs and reduce the national deficit. Corporate accountability. Enforce tax regulations on large corporations to close loopholes and ensure they pay a fair share. Implement penalties for companies avoiding taxes through offshore accounts and require transparency in corporate tax filings. Fair taxation on investments. Tax capital gains and dividends at rates similar to income from labor, ensuring that the wealthy contribute proportionally to public funds. Social Security sustainability. Lift the Social Security income cap to ensure the program's longevity and increase benefits to meet or exceed the minimum wage. Social Security should serve as a robust safety net for seniors, disabled individuals, and the economically disadvantaged. 4th, addressing housing inequality and affordable housing. National Affordable Housing Fund. Expand funding to create affordable housing units and rehabilitate existing units, targeting areas with acute housing shortages. This includes restoring public housing programs that have suffered funding cuts. Rent control initiatives. Support rent control measures and caps on annual rent increases to protect tenants from displacement and rent gouging, especially in high-cost urban areas. Home ownership programs. Facilitate first-time homebuyer support and down payment assistance to help low and middle-income families secure stable housing and invest in generational wealth. Homelessness prevention. Increase funding for homelessness prevention, transitional housing programs, and mental health services. The objective is to reduce homelessness through rapid rehousing initiatives and support networks. 5. Combating poverty and economic disparities. Enhanced welfare programs. Expand access to programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF, with adjusted eligibility requirements to help families meet basic needs. Targeted job training. Invest in workforce development programs that offer job training and skill-building opportunities for disadvantaged groups. Collaborate with industries facing labor shortages to create pathways to stable employment. Student debt forgiveness. Promote student debt forgiveness policies to alleviate economic burden and stimulate economic mobility, especially for those in public service sectors. Financial literacy programs. Fund national financial literacy initiatives to empower citizens with essential skills in budgeting, saving, and investing. Equip future generations with the knowledge to navigate the economy effectively. Healthcare is a human right. Overview. We should strive for a healthcare system that is accessible, affordable, and universal. A well-functioning healthcare system treats healthcare as a human right, not a privilege. This includes a comprehensive single-payer healthcare plan, an emphasis on preventive care, and removing financial barriers to critical medical services. 1. Single-payer healthcare system. Medicare for all. Implement a federally administered single-payer system that provides comprehensive healthcare for all citizens, covering preventive, emergency, and long-term care without copays or deductibles. The system would replace employer-based insurance, providing continuous coverage regardless of employment status. Universal coverage for prescriptions and essential services. Extend coverage to include dental, vision, hearing, and mental health care. Prescription drug costs would be negotiated and regulated to ensure affordability. Funding mechanisms. Fund the system through a mix of payroll taxes, income-based premiums, and increased taxation on the highest income brackets, ensuring that the cost is distributed fairly and sustainably. 2. Mental health and substance abuse services. Comprehensive mental health coverage. Ensure all healthcare plans include coverage for mental health services with no additional costs to the patient. Increase funding for mental health facilities, training programs, and counseling services. Addiction treatment and rehabilitation. Expand access to addiction treatment and harm reduction services, focusing on medically supervised treatment for opioid addiction and other substance use disorders. Preventive education and early intervention. Develop national educational programs in schools and communities to raise awareness and prevent substance abuse. Train educators, parents, and healthcare professionals to recognize early signs of addiction and mental health issues. 3. Affordable medication and drug price control. Price negotiation for Medicare. Empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies, leading to lower costs for patients. Cap prescription costs. Enact legislation to cap out-of-pocket prescription costs, protecting patients from exorbitant expenses that limit access to essential medication. Transparency in pharmaceutical pricing. Require pharmaceutical companies to disclose pricing justifications, ensuring that prices are based on development costs and not profit margins. 4. Long-term and elderly care. Accessible long-term care. Expand Medicare to include long-term care services for elderly and disabled individuals, supporting in-home and community-based care to promote independence and well-being. Support for caregivers. Provide financial assistance and tax credits for family caregivers to offset the costs associated with long-term care. Elderly health initiatives. Fund programs focusing on geriatric health, preventive screenings, and chronic disease management to improve the quality of life for aging citizens. Racial and environmental justice overview. We should address the intersection of racial and environmental justice to create an equitable society that protects marginalized communities from systemic oppression, economic inequity, and environmental harm. This means tackling racial biases within our institutions and reducing the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on communities of color. 1. Fighting systemic racism and promoting equality. Ending racially discriminatory policing. Practices. Establish national standards to prohibit racial profiling and the use of excessive force, with independent oversight to hold law enforcement accountable. Equitable legal representation. Increase funding for public defenders and legal aid programs to provide equitable legal representation for all, regardless of income, with particular focus on communities disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system. Banning for-profit prisons. End all contracts with for-profit prisons, which create incentives to incarcerate rather than rehabilitate, and prioritize restorative justice programs that offer support and opportunities to those re-entering society. Addressing racial health disparities. Prioritize funding for healthcare services in minority communities to reduce disparities in maternal mortality, chronic illness rates, and mental health services. 2. Environmental justice and public health protections. Tackling environmental racism. Develop regulations that specifically address pollution, industrial waste, and harmful chemicals often located near low-income and minority communities. Environmental protections must prioritize human health over corporate profit. Clean water and air initiatives increase funding for clean water infrastructure and air quality control in communities facing high pollution levels. Set enforceable national standards for air and water quality with dedicated resources for environmental restoration. Protection from hazardous facilities. Enforce strict zoning laws to prevent the placement of hazardous facilities in residential areas, especially in neighborhoods with historical exposure to environmental pollutants. Climate resilience for vulnerable communities. Allocate resources for climate adaptation projects in communities most at risk from natural disasters, with a focus on building resilient infrastructure, such as storm-resistant housing, improved flood protection, and emergency response systems. 3. Promoting sustainable economic opportunities. Green job training and employment. Invest in training programs for green jobs in renewable energy, clean technology, and environmental restoration, targeting economically disadvantaged areas. Green jobs can drive economic growth while advancing environmental goals. Sustainable urban development. Encourage urban redevelopment that includes green spaces, efficient public transit, and affordable housing in low-income areas to foster sustainable, healthy communities. Investing in renewable energy for low-income households. Increase federal and state support for renewable energy programs that provide solar panels, energy-efficient appliances, and insulation to low-income households, reducing utility costs and environmental impact. Democratic reform and citizen empowerment. Overview. We should strive to build a transparent, accountable, and inclusive democracy that amplifies the voices of all citizens, curbs corruption, and promotes fair representation. Reforming campaign finance, ensuring voter accessibility, and protecting civil liberties are essential to empowering every citizen. 1. Campaign finance reform. Ending corporate influence in politics. Ban corporate contributions to political campaigns and implement caps on individual donations to ensure equal influence across socioeconomic lines. Publicly funded elections. Establish a public funding option for federal elections. 2. Reduce candidates' reliance on wealthy donors and increase focus on serving the broader public. Transparent political spending. Require full disclosure of all political donations and expenditures, including those from super PACs, to allow voters to understand financial influences on candidates. Overturning Citizens United. Pursue a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United and restore the ability to limit corporate influence in politics. 2. Protecting voting rights and expanding access. Automatic voter registration. Implement automatic voter registration nationwide to ensure that all eligible citizens are registered to vote without unnecessary barriers. Restoring voting rights. Restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated individuals who have served their sentences, enabling them to participate fully in the democratic process. Ending gerrymandering. Establish independent, nonpartisan commissions to draw fair congressional and state legislative district boundaries, eliminating partisan gerrymandering. National voting standards. Develop consistent voting standards across states, including early voting, vote-by-mail options, and extended polling hours to ensure equitable access. 3. Strengthening civil liberties and privacy. Protecting freedom of speech. Safeguard the right to peaceful protest, and ensure protection against government surveillance of activists, journalists, and whistleblowers. Defending digital privacy. Pass comprehensive data privacy legislation that limits corporate and government surveillance with strict requirements for data protection and user consent. Ending qualified immunity, reform legal protections that shield law enforcement officers from accountability in cases of misconduct, ensuring accountability and rebuilding public trust. Civil liberties education. Promote public education on civil liberties and individual rights to build a well-informed populace prepared to advocate for democratic values. Healthcare, public health, and well-being overview. We should recognize healthcare as a fundamental right and ensure accessible, high-quality, and preventive healthcare services for all citizens. Building on a universal healthcare model, we should work to create a healthcare system that prioritizes patient outcomes, affordability, and preventive care. 1. Universal healthcare coverage. Medicare for all system. Transition to a Medicare for all system that eliminates deductibles, copayments, and network restrictions, providing comprehensive coverage for all medical, dental, and mental health needs. Cost control and drug pricing. Empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies, cap out-of-pocket prescription costs, and ensure that no patient goes without essential medications due to financial barriers. Mental health and substance abuse services. Fully integrate mental health and addiction services into Medicare for all, with dedicated resources for addiction recovery programs and preventative mental health services. 2. Public health and preventive care initiatives. Focus on preventive care. Increase funding for preventive services such as screenings, vaccinations, and educational programs to reduce the prevalence of chronic diseases and lower long-term healthcare costs. Community health investment. Fund community health centers, particularly in rural and underserved areas, to improve access to essential healthcare services for all citizens. National emergency response preparedness. Strengthen public health infrastructure to ensure rapid response capabilities for pandemics and natural disasters, with a focus on coordinating state and local resources. 3. Long-term care and support for the aging population. Affordable long-term care options. Expand Medicare to cover long-term care services, with additional support for family caregivers, ensuring that aging citizens receive dignified and respectful care. Social Security expansion. Strengthen Social Security benefits to keep up with living costs, particularly for low-income seniors, ensuring financial security for aging citizens. Geriatric health initiatives. Invest in programs targeting the unique health needs of the elderly, including chronic illness management, palliative care, and resources for navigating health benefits. Economic empowerment and worker rights. Overview. We should promote a fair and resilient economy where all workers are empowered to secure a livable wage, access essential benefits, and participate in their workplaces. Ensuring economic justice requires addressing income inequality, guaranteeing labor rights, and supporting a sustainable economy that benefits everyone. 1. Achieving a living wage and wage equity, $20 minimum wage by 2025. Advocate for a federal minimum wage of $20 per hour tied to inflation to ensure all workers can meet basic needs and reduce dependency on social assistance programs. Eliminating the tipped minimum wage, phase out the subminimum wage for tipped workers, ensuring all employees receive fair compensation and wage stability. Wage parity for women and minorities. Enforce pay equity laws to eliminate wage disparities based on gender, race, or ethnicity, requiring transparency and accountability from employers. Corporate accountability for wage violations. Strengthen enforcement mechanisms and penalties for companies that engage in wage theft, misclassification of workers, or other practices that underpay employees. 2. strengthening worker rights and workplace protections, right to unionize, reinforce the right to unionize across all sectors, including agricultural and domestic work, with stronger protections for employees facing intimidation or retaliation, co-determination for worker empowerment. Implement co-determination policies that allow employees to have representation on corporate boards, giving them a voice in company decisions that affect their lives. Fair scheduling laws. Establish fair scheduling practices that allow employees to plan their lives outside of work, with guaranteed notice for shift changes and compensation for last-minute schedule changes. Mandatory paid family and medical leave. Require employers to provide at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave, supporting families and individuals during critical life events and health issues. Third, building a sustainable and inclusive economy. Small business support, increase funding and resources for small business development, with a focus on underrepresented entrepreneurs to foster job creation and local economic resilience. Public investment in green jobs. Invest in infrastructure projects and green industries, creating millions of jobs in clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and environmental conservation. Fair trade practices. Negotiate trade agreements that protect domestic jobs, raise global labor standards, and ensure environmental protections, rejecting policies that prioritize corporate profits over worker well-being. Corporate accountability and wealth caps. Set caps on executive pay relative to median employee wages and limit corporate profiteering by instituting a wealth cap to curb excess accumulation that undermines economic equality. Education for all overview. We should aim to create an educational system that promotes equal access, fosters critical thinking, and prepares individuals for lifelong learning. This vision calls for investment at every level of education, from early childhood through higher education, to provide students with the resources they need to succeed. 1. Investing in early childhood education, universal pre-K, provide free, universal access to pre-kindergarten for all children, ensuring that every child has the foundation for academic success and social development. Increased funding for childcare. Make high-quality childcare affordable and accessible, with expanded subsidies for low and middle-income families to offset costs. Parental support programs. Create initiatives that support new parents with resources on early child development, education, and access to early intervention services for children with disabilities. 2. Revitalizing K-12 education. Equitable funding. Ensure all schools receive equitable funding, particularly those in underserved communities, by addressing disparities in property tax-based funding models. Reducing class sizes. Invest in reducing class sizes to foster personalized attention, especially in early grades where foundational skills are developed. Civics and critical thinking curriculum. Expand curricula that prioritize critical thinking, media literacy, and civics education, preparing students to be informed and engaged citizens. Supporting educators. Raise teacher pay to reflect the value of their profession, reduce reliance on standardized testing, and provide professional development opportunities for continual growth. 3. Making higher education accessible and affordable. Tuition-free public colleges and trade schools. Eliminate tuition at public colleges, universities, and trade schools, allowing students from all backgrounds to access higher education without accruing massive debt. Debt relief programs. Implement debt relief for existing student loan borrowers, with total forgiveness for low-income individuals and reduced payments for middle-income earners. Expanding vocational training and apprenticeships. Fund vocational training and apprenticeships to create pathways for students to enter skilled professions without the need for a 4-year degree. Supporting adult and continuing education. Increase funding for community-based programs that provide adult education, digital literacy, and career training, empowering people to pursue lifelong learning. Health, safety, and well-being for all overview. We should prioritize the health, safety, and well-being of all citizens by ensuring access to affordable health care, promoting public health, and creating systems that protect people from harm. This vision calls for a comprehensive health care system, robust public health initiatives, and support for those who are most vulnerable. 1. Medicare for all and universal health care. Medicare for all system. Develop a universal single-payer healthcare system that covers all essential services, including primary care, mental health, dental, vision, and prescription medications. Prescription drug cost controls. Implement price caps on essential medications and allow Medicare to negotiate prices directly with pharmaceutical companies to reduce overall healthcare costs. Mental health parity. Ensure that mental health and substance abuse treatments are fully integrated and funded within the Medicare for All system to provide comprehensive, accessible care. Long-term and palliative care services. Include long-term and palliative care within Medicare for all to support aging populations and those with chronic illnesses, allowing people to age with dignity. 2. Public health and preventive care initiatives. Preventive care investments. Increase funding for preventive health care measures such as screenings, vaccinations, and early interventions to reduce long-term health costs and improve quality of life. Community health clinics. Expand access to community health centers, particularly in rural and underserved areas, to ensure that all citizens have access to primary and preventive care. Comprehensive emergency preparedness. Strengthen the public health infrastructure for rapid response to pandemics and natural disasters, with special provisions for vulnerable populations and at-risk communities. 3. Addressing social determinants of health. Affordable housing initiatives. Expand affordable housing programs to reduce homelessness and provide stable living conditions, as housing is a foundational determinant of health. Access to nutritious food. Increase funding for nutrition assistance programs. Incentivize grocery stores and food deserts, and support farmers markets in urban areas to improve access to healthy food. Clean water and air. Enforce strict regulations on water and air quality, targeting improvements in communities that have historically been affected by industrial pollution and environmental neglect. Reducing economic inequality. Address the root causes of health disparities by reducing income inequality, increasing access to education, and providing economic opportunities for all citizens. Housing, homelessness, and urban development. Overview. We should address the housing crisis by expanding affordable housing, protecting renters, and providing robust support for the homeless population. A stable home is foundational to individual success and community resilience. 1. Expanding affordable housing. National Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Increase funding for the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund to construct, preserve, and rehabilitate affordable rental housing for low-income families. Rent control and tenant protections. Advocate for rent control policies in high-cost areas, and enforce protections against unfair evictions and exploitative rental practices. Incentives for affordable development. Offer tax credits and other incentives for developers who prioritize affordable housing projects, particularly in areas with high housing demand. Public housing investment. Provide substantial funding to repair and modernize public housing units, ensuring safe, healthy, and dignified living conditions for residents. 2. Addressing homelessness. Housing. First approach. Implement a housing-first model to provide immediate housing for the homeless, coupled with supportive services for job training, mental health, and substance abuse treatment. Emergency shelters and transitional housing. Expand emergency shelters and transitional housing options to reduce street homelessness and offer a path to stable housing. Homeless prevention programs. Increase funding for programs that provide rental assistance, eviction prevention, and support services for individuals and families at risk of homelessness. Veterans homelessness initiatives. Prioritize homeless veterans with specialized housing and support services to address their unique needs and honor their service. 3. Urban development and community investment. Sustainable urban design. Encourage green spaces, public parks, and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure in urban areas to improve quality of life and promote environmental health. Community land trusts. Support the development of community land trusts to empower neighborhoods and prevent gentrification, allowing residents to retain control over their communities. Public transportation expansion. Invest in affordable, accessible public transportation systems that reduce reliance on personal vehicles, lower emissions, and connect communities to economic opportunities. Local economic revitalization. Provide funding for economic revitalization projects that support small businesses, job creation, and community initiatives in low-income urban areas. Environmental stewardship and climate action overview. We should lead in combating climate change and promoting environmental sustainability. Addressing climate change is a moral imperative and an economic opportunity, calling for clean energy initiatives, conservation efforts, and environmental justice for all communities. 1. Transitioning to clean and renewable energy. 100% clean energy by 2050. Set ambitious targets to transition entirely to renewable energy sources by 2050, phasing out fossil fuels and investing heavily in wind, solar, and other renewable sources. Federal support for clean energy jobs. Allocate funding to support clean energy jobs, providing training and job security for workers transitioning from the fossil fuel industry. End subsidies for fossil fuels. Redirect federal subsidies from fossil fuels toward renewable energy, supporting technologies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote sustainable energy. Investing in energy storage. Develop energy storage infrastructure to stabilize renewable energy supplies, ensuring consistent access to clean energy across the country. 2. Environmental justice and community health. Addressing pollution in vulnerable communities. Prioritize pollution reduction efforts in historically impacted communities, improving air and water quality and reducing exposure to harmful chemicals. Comprehensive lead abatement programs. Fund nationwide lead abatement initiatives, removing lead from pipes, homes, and schools to protect public health. Expansion of community green spaces. Invest in urban green spaces, community gardens, and recreational areas in underserved communities, enhancing quality of life and access to nature. Health protections for climate-impacted regions. Provide additional healthcare resources and response teams in areas impacted by climate-related health risks, such as wildfire-prone regions and flood zones. 3. Building climate-resilient infrastructure. Sustainable infrastructure investments. Rebuild and modernize infrastructure with a focus on resilience, using sustainable materials and designs that reduce vulnerability to climate change. Flood prevention and water management. Invest in flood prevention and advanced water management systems to protect communities from rising sea levels and extreme weather. Wildfire prevention and mitigation. Enhance wildfire management strategies, funding controlled burns and forest management practices that reduce the risk of catastrophic fires. Community disaster preparedness. Develop disaster preparedness programs that equip communities with the resources and plans needed to respond to climate-related emergencies. 4. Protecting natural ecosystems and biodiversity. Endangered species. Protection. Strengthen and enforce the Endangered Species Act to protect at-risk species from habitat destruction and climate impacts. Conservation of public lands. Preserve and expand national parks, forests, and wildlife refuges, ensuring these lands remain accessible and protected for future generations. Sustainable agriculture and fishing practices. Support sustainable farming and fishing practices that protect natural resources, reduce chemical runoff, and conserve biodiversity. Combating deforestation. Promote reforestation and afforestation initiatives, both domestically and internationally, to restore forests and sequester carbon. Justice and civil rights overview. We should ensure that all individuals are treated with dignity and equality under the law. This vision includes reforming the criminal justice system, upholding voting rights, and protecting the rights of historically marginalized communities. 1. Criminal justice reform. End mass incarceration. Reduce prison populations by eliminating mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent offenses and expanding alternative sentencing options such as community service and drug courts. Abolish private prisons. Phase out private prisons and detention centers, ending profit incentives tied to incarceration and ensuring all correctional facilities are publicly managed. Decriminalize marijuana. Remove marijuana from the list of controlled substances, legalizing its use nationwide and expunging past convictions for marijuana-related offenses. Police reform and accountability. Require body cameras for all law enforcement officers, strengthen accountability measures for police misconduct, and invest in community policing to build trust between police and communities. 2. Protecting voting rights. Automatic voter registration. Implement automatic voter registration for all citizens upon turning 18, ensuring every eligible American has access to the democratic process. Restore the Voting Rights Act. Reinstate the Voting Rights Act protections to prevent discriminatory practices that restrict access to voting. Election Day is a national holiday. Designate Election Day as a federal holiday, making it easier for citizens to participate in elections without work or time constraints. Fair and accessible voting methods. Increase access to mail-in voting, early voting, and secure online voting options, ensuring every citizen can vote in a way that is convenient and secure. 3. Fighting for equality and ending discrimination. Strengthening civil rights protections. Enforce and expand civil rights laws to address discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and other protected categories. Support for LGBTQ+ rights. Enact protections to ensure LGBTQ+ individuals have equal access to housing, employment, health care, and public services. Disability rights and accessibility. Improve accessibility standards across public and private spaces, and increase funding for programs that support independent living and employment for people with disabilities. Equal pay and workplace protections. Strengthen legislation that mandates equal pay for equal work and provides protections against workplace harassment and discrimination. Comprehensive immigration reform. Overview. We should create a humane and effective immigration system that respects the dignity of individuals and supports the nation's economic and social needs. This approach calls for a fair path to citizenship, smart border management, and protection for asylum seekers. 1. Pathway to citizenship. Citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Provide a clear and achievable path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, allowing them to contribute fully to society without fear of deportation. Expansive relief for dreamers. Grant dreamers an expedited pathway to citizenship and full access to educational and employment opportunities. Inclusive eligibility criteria ensure that the path to citizenship is inclusive, without arbitrary cutoff dates or restrictive qualifications that exclude vulnerable groups. Minimize financial barriers. Make the citizenship process affordable, removing prohibitive fees that prevent low-income applicants from applying for legal status. 2. Humane border and asylum policies. End family detention. Eliminate family detention facilities and prioritize family unity for individuals seeking asylum. Accountability for border agencies. Improve oversight of border enforcement agencies, mandating transparency and accountability to prevent abuse and protect human rights. Enhanced asylum protections. Restore protections for asylum seekers, streamline the application process, and end expedited removals that prevent due process. Modern border technology. Employ technology-driven solutions for border management, focusing on safety and security without resorting to militarized enforcement practices. 3. Fair treatment for immigrant workers. Protecting worker rights. Ensure all immigrant workers, regardless of status, have legal protections against exploitation and access to safe working conditions. Addressing wage theft and exploitation. Implement stronger enforcement against employers who engage in wage theft, labor exploitation, or retaliatory practices toward immigrant employees. Pathways for guest workers. Reform the visa system for temporary guest workers to prevent exploitation, ensure fair wages, and provide a route to permanent residency when desired. Access to health care and benefits. Extend access to health care and social services for all immigrants, allowing them to access essential care without fear of deportation or discrimination. Technology and privacy overview. We should foster innovation while protecting privacy and data security. This approach prioritizes ethical technology use, transparent governance, and safeguards for citizens' digital rights. 1. Data privacy and security. Comprehensive data privacy law. Enact a federal data privacy law that gives individuals full control over their personal data, with strict penalties for companies that misuse or mishandle data. Right to be forgotten. Guarantee individuals the right to have their personal information removed from databases or online platforms upon request, except in cases where it conflicts with public interest. Consent-based data collection. Require that all companies obtain clear and informed consent before collecting, using, or sharing personal data. Protection against government surveillance. Limit government surveillance programs and require court oversight for data collection on citizens to prevent abuses of power and ensure individual privacy. 2. Encouraging ethical use of artificial intelligence. Transparency in AI development. Mandate transparency in AI systems that impact public life, requiring disclosure of AI usage and clear explanations of decision-making processes. Fairness and non-discrimination. Implement guidelines to ensure that AI systems are free from bias and discrimination, particularly in areas like hiring, lending, and law enforcement. Worker rights and automation. Protect workers displaced by AI and automation, offering retraining programs and financial assistance to ease workforce transitions. AI safety standards. Establish safety protocols and regular assessments for high-stakes AI applications such as healthcare, transportation, and criminal justice to prevent unintended harm. 3. Promoting digital inclusion. Universal broadband access. Invest in broadband infrastructure to ensure every American, regardless of location, has access to affordable high-speed internet. Digital literacy education. Implement digital literacy programs in schools and community centers to prepare citizens for a technology-driven world. Support for small tech enterprises. Provide grants and incentives for small tech businesses, encouraging innovation and competition in the tech industry. Cybersecurity support for individuals and small businesses. Offer cybersecurity resources and assistance to protect personal and business data from cyber threats. Foreign policy and national defense overview. We should promote a foreign policy centered on diplomacy, human rights, and peaceful cooperation, while maintaining a strong defense that safeguards national security without compromising our values. 1. Prioritizing diplomacy and peace building. Strengthening international alliances. Engage constructively with allies through NATO and other international organizations, ensuring cooperative approaches to global challenges. Renewed commitment to the United Nations. Increase engagement with the UN to address humanitarian crises, support peacekeeping efforts, and promote sustainable development goals worldwide. Global conflict prevention. Invest in diplomatic efforts and international coalitions aimed at preventing conflicts before they escalate, focusing on root causes like poverty, climate change, and political instability. Support for global nuclear non-proliferation. Continue working to reduce nuclear arsenals worldwide, advancing treaties and cooperative initiatives aimed at eliminating nuclear threats. 2. Upholding human rights and democracy. Support for democratic movements. Advocate for and support peaceful democratic movements abroad, providing assistance to nations striving to uphold democratic values. Condemnation of human rights abuses. Publicly condemn and impose sanctions on nations involved in significant human rights abuses, such as political oppression, ethnic persecution, and violence against minorities. Empowering civil society organizations. Provide funding and support for civil society organizations promoting democracy, free press, and human rights, especially in nations with restricted civic freedoms. Protection of journalists and activists. Advocate for the rights of journalists, activists, and whistleblowers globally, supporting laws and policies that protect freedom of expression. 3. Smart defense spending and resource allocation. Reducing military expenditures. Scale down excessive military spending by eliminating wasteful projects, closing unnecessary bases, and streamlining military operations. Modernizing defense to address emerging threats. Allocate resources to cyber defense, counterterrorism, and other modern threats that align with national security needs in a changing world. Ethical use of drone warfare. Establish strict guidelines governing drone use in military operations to minimize civilian casualties and uphold international law. Investment in veteran services. Increase funding for veteran support services, including healthcare, mental health, housing, and job placement, ensuring veterans receive the care and respect they have earned. 4th, addressing global health and climate security. International climate agreements. Rejoin and strengthen international climate agreements, promoting shared action on emissions reduction, deforestation prevention, and environmental restoration. Global health partnerships. Fund and partner with global health initiatives to address disease outbreaks, improve vaccine access, and enhance healthcare infrastructure in low-income countries. Combating transnational crime. Cooperate internationally to combat human trafficking, drug smuggling, arms dealing, and other transnational crimes that threaten security and stability. Promoting sustainable development. Support sustainable development in vulnerable regions to combat poverty, reduce immigration pressures, and promote stability through economic empowerment. Framework for action, setting standards and benchmarks. Overview. We should measure the success of each initiative to ensure accountability, transparency, and real impact. Setting clear benchmarks helps us achieve tangible progress toward these goals. 1. Data-driven policymaking. Transparent data collection and reporting. Implement rigorous data collection on all major initiatives and make this information publicly accessible to allow for independent evaluation and accountability. Policy impact assessments. Require periodic impact assessments to measure the effectiveness of policies across all sectors, including health, education, economy, and social justice. Citizen feedback mechanisms. Establish accessible channels for citizens to provide feedback on policies, ensuring that government actions reflect the real needs of the population. 2. Setting national benchmarks for progress. Annual progress reports. Publish comprehensive annual reports detailing progress on key initiatives, allowing for adjustments and reallocations as needed. Independent oversight committees. Establish oversight committees for major sectors, e.g., healthcare, environment, defense, to ensure ethical standards, budgetary discipline, and adherence to objectives. Partnerships with local governments. Collaborate with state and local governments to set customized benchmarks that address regional needs while supporting national goals. 3. Fiscal responsibility and budgeting. Progressive tax reform. Implement tax policies that ensure adequate funding for social programs, education, and infrastructure by taxing high earners and closing corporate tax loopholes. Balancing investments and debt management. Ensure that public investments promote long-term economic growth and avoid unsustainable debt practices. Transparent budget allocation. Publish clear budgets for each policy initiative, detailing projected costs and funding sources to enhance accountability and taxpayer trust. 4. Empowering citizen engagement and education. Public education campaigns. Launch campaigns to educate the public on key policies, their rights, and how they can access benefits and participate in government initiatives. Civic engagement programs. Create programs that encourage civic involvement, such as local town halls, participatory budgeting, and community councils. Youth empowerment initiatives. Promote youth engagement in politics through educational programs, leadership training, and mentorship, fostering the next generation of informed and active citizens. Annual National Forum. Host an annual national forum for citizens, experts, and leaders to discuss progress, share feedback, and shape future policy directions. Together, let us choose courage over complacency, compassion over cruelty, and unity over division. We are more than mere inhabitants of this land. We are the stewards of its promise. We are tasked not only with lifting our voices for justice, but with lifting each other, ensuring that no one is left behind in the journey toward a brighter tomorrow. For the parent who works tirelessly for a child's future, for the soldier who serves with honor, for the young person daring to dream in a world of uncertainty, and for the elder whose life's work has paved the way, we owe a world of justice, dignity, and hope. And so we take this stand not as politicians, but as people bound by a common, unwavering faith in each other and in what we can accomplish together. We plant the seeds today that will grow into the legacy of tomorrow, a legacy that says we were here, that we cared deeply, and that we didn't just hope for change, we became it. May future generations look back and say, they answered the call, they dared greatly, and they left us a world worth inheriting.